what's the difference between the state coming in and censoring something and then like, I mean, like
the difference is the power. The difference is the differential of power. That's the main difference I see. Yeah.
Elon Musk's like straight. I don't know. Like, what do you even call that? Like, I probably used to call that like IDW shit, and it is kind of like IDW adjacent. But there's a sector of the IDW that is just like dudes.
I think he's just the DW. I think it's like, you know, he's not quite on the intellectual level of, say, a Jordan Peterson or a Ben Shapiro. He's a step down, you know, but he's mids. Elon mids. He's a mids dark web.
Right?
So, hello everybody. Thank you for coming to this panel. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I'm very happy to have the guests we have on here right now and a couple more who are supposed to come. This panel is supposed to be addressing an issue that I think affects all creators and even the people watching the content on this space. And the subject matter is, how do we responsibly platform people, and can we de-radicalize people through the internet? We're this is going to be over 3 hours total, but we're going to split this up kind of halfway in between. We have 3 broad reaching questions, and we're going to let things go down whatever relevant rabbit hole, excuse me, that we think that they can go down. I'm going to be co-moderating here with Yamato, who is opposite to me. You want to wave hi for everybody, Yamato? That's Yamato. Then we have Jangles. Jangles, would you like to plug yourself real quick? We should do shoutouts right now, and then I'll do the first prompt.
Hi everyone, my name is Justin. I go by Django Science Lad on the internet, and I do lots of video essays and debates.
Okay, and where can people find you?
Django's Science Lad on the YouTubes. I don't stream on Twitch, but occasionally upload stuff to YouTube.
Okay, and next we have Irene / nocommentchick. Irene, hello, good to have you.
Good to be here.
Where can we find you?
Good to be here. Well, I stream on Twitch and on YouTube as well, and I've been starting to get into what Jangles does, although I gotta say, making video essays is not easy. You know, I've just dipped my toes into it, so we're doing more and more of that more prepared content on YouTube these days. But what I talk about is, you know, kind of similar to our topic today. I talk about the effect of people's platforms on marginalized voices.
And I am, of course, ninetailscosmicfox. For those of you who don't know me, I'm mostly a debater. I debate from the left. You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/ninetailscosmicfox. You spell it out all one word. It's not nine tails like the Pokemon. It's actually 9 tails, as if like an animal tail. So just so people don't get confused, because everyone thinks it's the Pokemon. And on Twitter, I am at M9Scarlet. That's the letter M, the number 9, and Scarlet with 2 T's and no E at the end. I really didn't think about that Twitter thing when I first made it about trying to shout it out later, but oh well.
Oh, Ninetails, did you realize that your poster, your name on your poster is Ninetails Cosmic Ox?
Oh,
or
I think it's
Cox. I don't know.
Cosmic Cox, yeah, Ninetails Cosmic Cox. I particularly left it because I thought it was hilarious, and I did not save the thing right to fix it easily, so it was just kind of, it is what it is, so I left it up.
Okay.
9 tails that are Cosmic Cox. Okay, so we have a series of questions we're going to answer. I'm going to try to give about half an hour to each one. So take your time to, like, if you have any intros you want to say, or if you just want to be like, I'm for or against it, yes, no, whatever you think the right answer is fine.
Hold on real quick. I think we forgot to introduce the co-host of the panel.
Oh yeah, Yamato, if you do want to introduce yourself, I know you don't stream, but you're more than welcome to have an introduction.
Okay. I'm Black Yamato. I am a starting out producer for my buddy Wick here, also somebody online. I do stream. It's just video game stuff, by the way, if you guys want to like watch me die in Elden Ring or something like that. So just I also help Ninetails with art and stuff. So if people need thumbnails or anything like that, the guy to go to.
Yamato,
Oh.
DM me your link so that way I can get that to my chat. I don't. If you ever mentioned that, and I totally forgot, and I'm so sorry. But thank you, Producer Dave, for reminding me to do that.
And Yamato is a lovely guy.
Just trying to be a team player.
Yeah, I love hanging out with Yamato.
Yeah, he's super chill. Lovely dude.
Okay, so the question for the panel, first one, is can non-radicalized debaters win against bad faith actors who we can assume are radicalized, who use recruiting rhetoric? So I'm going to start in the reverse direction this time. I'm going to start with Viv, and we can work our way back. And yeah, just try to keep it under 2 minutes, but just say whatever you need to say.
Well, the question's interesting. It depends on what you mean by winning. I think for the vast majority of like Twitch streamers and so on, winning is not beating the other person down, changing a whole bunch of people's minds. Winning is having an entertaining performance that gets more and more people coming to your channel and donating and so on. That's what winning is for most streamers, I would say. And I've definitely seen people throw other things by the wayside in pursuit of that. But so I guess it really, really does depend on what you mean by winning. If your goal is to de-radicalize a whole bunch of folks, I don't think that it is. I don't think it is possible from like one video. And I think our understanding of de-radicalization too, or at least the understanding I hear bandied about in the Twitch sphere, seems to be a person is convinced by arguments to change their mind on their previously held radical beliefs and come to a more moderate position. And I just don't think that is something that happens. I think when we look at the psychology of people who leave extremist movements, there's often a lot of things going on in their lives that lead them to a point at which they're willing to reconsider their beliefs. And anybody who isn't at that point is not going to be swayed by any manner of debate. In fact, there's a couple of studies that seem to suggest that attempting to debate them out of their beliefs merely further entrenches them in them. But I do think one of the things that can be provided by online content creators is that when people are ready or are in a place where they want to reconsider their ideas, it can provide them an opportunity to learn more about ideas outside of their previous sphere. And that can be, for them, a pathway towards usually towards a different ideology, but possibly out of a radical or extremist ideology.
Okay, thank you. Next we go to Wick. Wick, do you have any thoughts on this?
Oh, I have plenty. I think that the question is phrased very interesting, and it does come. What do you mean by win? Like, very rarely will someone live on air change their position or change their mind. Really, the purpose of discussing these topics, things with people who are using recruiting, bad faith actors who are using recruitment rhetoric, or anyone really, isn't to change the mind of the person you're interacting with. It's to reach the audience. Now, persuasion, it's not something that's going to happen after one conversation. No one's going to listen to you and be like, I've seen the light, and kind of go off on their on this new path, free of radical ideas, free of extremism. It doesn't work like that. But you can be a part of the process, and I think that streamers and other forms of media are a part of this process, for good and ill, right? Like, people can be further radicalized, but they can also be de-radicalized isn't the right word, but shown different ways. And so you may plant seeds in the audience members' minds and hearts. You may plant seeds in the person you're interacting with. That'll be harvested later by someone else. But you definitely can be a part of the persuasive process when it comes to these things. That's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. And next we go to producer Dave.
So I think it's winning a debate. I mean, I'm down to rope-a-dope and like try to humiliate somebody if I feel like that's what needs to happen, but that's maybe not what we mean by winning the debate. I think a really important distinction to draw is, are you talking to the propagandist or someone who is being propagandized? If you're talking to the propagandist, they're going to have a vested interest in never changing their mind because their brand is their propaganda. So if you talk to that person, you're not really trying to change their mind at all. That's for the audience. That's for their audience specifically, who might see your discussion with them. Because if you can poke some holes in them and kind of maybe even poke a little fun at what they're saying in a way that's not too aggressive, which maybe I'm a little too aggressive sometimes with that. But if you can do that, like, humor is a really powerful tool, and you might be able to bring over members of their audience. Now, if it's somebody who you think is being propagandized, that's a whole other story. And most of the time, as a Twitch streamer, they've come in, they've been propagandized, they have these ideas, and they're going to, if they want to like join your Discord or whatever to talk to you, they're almost there on behalf of maybe the content creator that they do like, or at least that's what they feel like they're doing. I've only ever gotten one person to like reconsider their stuff in years and years and years of doing this. So what's really important, and I think kind of bouncing off of what Vivian said, is if the people who are being propagandized are going to get out, it's going to be their friends and their family that are doing it. And the best that I'm going to be able to do is plant a seed, you know, and I kind of guess that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm hearing, and this is something that I think about a lot too, is like, without like that other frame of reference, people might analyze things, like say they come into a conflict with what they currently think, which is some Nick Fuentes stuff or something like that. And without that other frame of reference, if there's something wrong with it, they don't have anything else to look to analyze that situation. Okay, so next I want to, and I'm just saying that now, so that way I don't need to interject later, since I'm not going to be on the panel. But next, let's go to Irene. Irene, you prefer Irene, right?
Sure. I mean, like, whatever's easy. Most people are like, you know, NCC or Irene or no. I mean, right? No comment check for some reason doesn't roll off the tongue, but sure, yeah, Irene. Yeah. So Vivian, I think was right. Yeah, Vivian was right. It depends on what you mean by winning. She mentioned some ways that you could win for yourself, but do harm to the overall discourse. And when you're talking about right-wing radicals who are recruiting you, you know, who are out there recruiting, you got to be really careful and maybe do an ego check. Are you doing this for the right reason, or is it just a flex? Because the cost of being wrong isn't just failing to persuade, but it might be helping the right to recruit. That's something that I'm really cautious about. When you bring somebody on stream with you, you might unconsciously be sending your audience signals just by being gracious to them, like you usually are to another person that you're talking to. You know, you're signaling that although their ideas might be wrong, that at the end of the day, they're okay people. And, you know, that can be dangerous, because then your audience might warm up to somebody that they otherwise wouldn't have by you kind of normalizing, you know, their presence through bringing them on. This goes double if you bring them back like multiple times and maybe even develop a little bit of a rapport with them. We've seen this happen on Twitch over and over again, and it always ends the same way, with the intellectual capture of the, you know, lefty streamer who's ignored or missed the point of the paradox of tolerance. And I mean, I think that there's a lot of caution that needs to be taken, and I don't see a lot being taken, although some people are taking this more seriously now than, say, like a year ago, right? So yeah, there, you know, caution. There are dragons there.
Perhaps chaos dragons.
The dragon of chaos, perhaps.
I mean, I disagree. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
I want to get to Jangles. I
sorry.
want to know if Yamato has anything to say, and then we'll go straight to you, Viv.
Okay, I think I agree with a lot of things that people have been saying. So instead of just like restating their opinions over, I'll introduce some other things. So yeah, I do think that it takes a certain amount of bravado, a certain amount of like an ego to get on the internet and engage in competitive opinion having, which is what, you know, debates are, what panels are. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. I do think there's an element, you got to be a little bit entertaining. Like, there's no clean separation between, am I focusing on being entertaining, or do I also want to win the debate? Because winning the debate is way more entertaining, and it's way more entertaining when you win the debate. So there's no clean separation between those two. I think it is good to like understand that being entertaining, being likable, having that ethos, that having that character is an important part of being training someone's mind. times. Have you? I think all of us have found someone who is arguing on our side, but doing so in a way that is so unlikable that you really don't want to say the things they do. Like they say, like, "Well, yeah, of course the grass is green." You're like, "Oh, I bet I can find some fucking blue grass, purple grass, asshole." I think we can all agree that like someone's character is important. You want to be likable. So, there's no clean separation between performativity and information and a bunch of that stuff. It is, let's see what else I write down here. Yeah, I think something that we're going to talk about a lot is what does it take to change someone's mind? Because it is people who are scientifically minded and like studies and like evidence and stuff like that, it's really disheartening to not only like go through the personal experience of actually this claim you made is 100% wrong, here's evidence, and then like, oh, all the evidence is made up. All right, because I feel differently, and that's not how it is. Evidence. That's disheartening, and of course, there's like the actual studies. Ironically, the evidence that supports the evidence that says that just correcting someone on a factual basis doesn't seem to meaningfully sway their opinion in any one direction. I think there's some really interesting research, and actually, Faraday Speaks has been involved in this research regarding something called inoculation theory. And inoculation theory legitimately works like traditional medical inoculation. You expose people to low doses of bad arguments to show, like, here's their thought process, here's the emotional manipulation that they're engaging in. And it seems to be very, very effective at least preventing radicalization. So, like, they've done a bunch of studies in like pre and post control groups and all that fun stuff, and people who were inoculized to certain ideas were much less likely to have a radicalized opinion after being exposed to them. So yeah, I think that's like 2 minutes. Yeah.
I was definitely timing it, and if you took too long, I'm gonna like make sure that other people get turns first. Just kidding.
I want our next use not to talk anymore.
When do you start talking about inoculation? That's something I've been talking about for fucking years, but I've not seen any studies on it. I'm gonna have to slap him if he stole it from me.
Yamato, real quick, did you want to get anything in since you're a moderator, and I know you're probably going to be holding your tongue most of the time?
What do you guys think is the best effective measure when de-radicalizing people? Because when I think about it, I think about like meeting them halfway and trying to figure out what in their lives are affecting them to, have these type of thoughts that attracts them to these people that do like kind of manipulation or give like, what do you guys think is the best like form of de-radicalization?
Well, it really depends on your relationship to the person, actually. Like me as a streamer, I'm probably not going to de-radicalize any individual. Me as someone's best friend who's a little bit estranged from them because they've started down the rabbit hole, if I care about that person, it's time for me to get to work.
Yeah, I agree with Dave there. It's huge to do this with people. Now, and this is if you can, right? Because understand that de-radicalization isn't just talking to somebody. It is emotional labor, and it takes a toll on you. You might be the right kind of person to do that. You might have a relationship with somebody where you really don't want to see them slip down that rabbit hole. And like Dave said, if it's somebody in your life, you can absolutely do that. I don't think that streamers can do that. I know a lot of streamers like pride themselves as being de-radicalizers, and they can point to somebody in their community who used to be super right wing and they got him out of there. And I guess, but where I think you can see it work best and actually fully pull somebody out is when they have a relationship like what Dave was talking about.
Just real quick on this, John Atack runs this thing called the Open Minds Foundation. It's out of the United Kingdom, and they do just amazing work in this sphere. He's a former Scientologist, and they don't try to deprogram. They a lot of times offer services and support when people are on their way out. So if any of you ever want a real good interview guest, or just want to go check out some material on this from people who've been working on it, specifically as it relates to top-down cults and in-person control groups, it's a great resource, and all their stuff's free, and it's all really approachable and easy to read. So I can't recommend the Open Minds Foundation enough.
So recently I've had a talk with Daryl Davis, the guy that takes like ex-KKK members and like helps them recovers, and like I've asked him a important question that everyone thought was important, I guess, that how do younger Black people reach out to these communities that feel like they're harmed by the minorities? And he said, look at it from their perspective. Do you think that is always the best way to engage with these people?
I'm just surprised because
sorry,
my
I was
first
going to make sure you talked, Viv. Sorry.
my first question for Daryl Davis would be, why'd you bail out a fucking KKK Grand Wizard who like fired off his gun at Charlottesville? Like, why are you still friends with this dude after you like gave him a shit ton of money and him and all his mates were laughing about how you're a fucking gorilla or whatever they were saying in their chat? Like, I think Daryl Davis is the perfect example of somebody who has good intentions, right? Like, but I think one, he's very caught up in the myth of himself. He doesn't provide a lot of evidence for his claims, and you would think if this was such an effective de-radicalization method, he would want to be sharing it with everybody. He has adopted, in fact, a lot of the sort of like more. I would say somewhat reactionary positions around, for example, systemic racism, which he's quite sketchy on when he talks, especially when he had that conversation with Matthew Heimbach during the period that Heimbach was pretending to no longer be a Nazi. So I don't know. I find Daryl Davis's particular methods to be somewhat ineffective. Definitely not, at least their effectiveness is not evidenced, and it also puts a lot of people in harm. I think he gets far too close. So that whole idea about meeting people halfway or whatever, trying to see it from their point of view, I think it is like, I try and see it from their point of view. I want to understand these people. I've spent years listening to and speaking to people who are in various like extremist communities in order to understand their thought processes. But there is a danger of getting too close and of allowing either yourself to be swayed by more reactionary or extremist positions, and of being more permissive of reactionary and extremist positions than I think is reasonable for you to be. So yeah, I mean, that's what I got to say about the whole Daryl Davis thing. And I feel bad because I think he's a decent guy. I have a lot of problems with what he does.
One of the biggest problems of like Twitch politics is that you can't, get that closeness with another person. So there always is that air of performativity. Like, you're not there to talk to this person. That's not fun. Like, meeting someone halfway, talking them through, being very, very kind, usually isn't very entertaining. You want the dunks, you want the winning, you want that like good endorphin rush of like beating another person, and that has its place. But in order to go the other way, like, there's always this pull that I have in debates is, all right, how can I like counter what they're saying without being quote unquote too charitable, too civil, like not pushing back hard enough? It's a very hard balance to strike, and there's no right answer that's going to please everybody. If you are talking one-on-one with a person, without an audience, without someone that they have to perform to, so they don't have the ego loss of, they get for lack of a better word, a safe space to be wrong and not have to like admit it to anybody. I do think it is important to be as close as you can, to be as understanding as you can, to let them be extremists, to let them say horrible shit to you, because, and not call them out on it too much, because who is going to change their mind? Who's going to listen to someone who is just saying, "Doc, you're wrong. You're just a racist. You're a bigot. You're an idiot." Who's going to listen to someone like that? Like, I certainly wouldn't. And I don't think a lot of people who especially who are that entrenched in what they believe, that's going to instantly put them off. You've obviously you already like opened the wrong door, and now they're in attack mode. Now they're in defense mode. No one wants to change their mind because someone convinced them out of it. It's just going to hurt the ego too much.
Sorry.
I was basically done.
Okay. Here, let's do Wick, and then producer Dave. Did you want to go? Okay, yeah. Anyone can raise their hand, and Viv, if you want to speak, just message me, and I'll try to keep an eye out for that.
Okay. I think Jingles makes a very good point. Like, when people feel attacked, when people feel like they are under assault, it tends to put them in defensive mode. And where in a different setting they might agree with you, actually, and you could have a productive conversation, there's a performative nature to what we do on stream and on air. And when they are feeling all the eyeballs, all the audience members, maybe reading chat, reading all the dunks the chat's giving them as well, it really isn't a conductive space to really reach out, I think, if your goal is really to persuade and to bring people over the person you're talking to. However, I do think that for me, I always try to treat everyone as a human being, right? Like, no matter how noxious or odious their beliefs might be, I find no value, and I just find it distasteful to really treat them as too much of an other, right? Until we can recognize that even though our political enemies are other human beings, it's going to be very hard to reach out to them. And this plays across the political spectrum. I'm talking more about, conservatives rather than radicals in this case, right? Like, a lot of times we try to push all conservatives or all people who disagree with us into this radical camp. It's effective rhetoric in some cases. There was an argument earlier in my Discord about which party Putin would most likely be if he was in America today. Would he be a Republican or a Democrat? And they were getting pretty angry with each other over this nonsense question. It was a nonsense question. It was a nonsense kind of debate.
Counterfactual.
But they were being very like at each other's throats about this because it was so important for them to just make sure that everyone knew that the other party was the most like Putin, right? And I think that it's just a problem, right? And so I try to make sure that when I am interacting with someone who does have really toxic beliefs, that I let them know that, yeah, maybe I hate their beliefs, maybe I think their beliefs are stupid, but they themselves still have value. And I think that it's hard to do otherwise.
So this makes me want to ask a question, because I'm spending a lot of time in servers where people do mingle like this. And I think, like, sure, like, if you're streaming and you're a content creator specifically, that's one thing. But I do think, like, here on Discord, there can be, like, voice channels or text channels, for example, where this mingling can happen. Does it make sense for people who are trying to de-radicalize other people and maybe like leftists with their own like online content creation thing to still have a space where they can let this happen? Or are they trading something off with that? Because I often feel like it's not an easy decision if I were to do that. But maybe I'm an optimist.
It's a risk-reward thing, isn't it? You know, maybe you pull a couple of people out or whatever. Maybe a few people change their minds here and there. But ultimately, having those kinds of discords, those kinds of spaces, generally function to just like push people towards like further extremist spaces. You know, everybody's seen my fucking bust-ups with Doobie or whatever over the politics server. But like, it is true that I used that server to get myself invited to a whole shit ton of Nazi servers, right? Because it was that easy. It was just such a beautiful ramp onto some real like messed up extremist spaces. The same thing for like having a Discord if you were to set it up primarily for the purposes of de-radicalization. I'm sure Faraday can speak a little about that when he turns up later, because we were both involved in at least one of the projects I was involved with, Faraday, doing pretty much just that during my bright-eyed, bushy-tailed idealist days of thinking that something like that was potentially a good idea. You know, it opens people up to all kinds of abuse. You're dealing with like anonymous voices on the internet, and quite often when we're talking about extremists, especially far-right extremists, they're looking to do you damage if you're in that position. And not just you, right? Like the people who own the server, the people who moderate the server, the people who come to the server in the hopes of like de-radicalizing people and so on. All of those people are at like serious risk. And I just don't think that having a bunch of untrained people who really don't know a lot about what they're doing engaging in this kind of behavior online is going to produce a measurable good that outweighs the frankly catastrophic damage that I've seen it do in several communities. We're talking international police investigations, terrorist threats, and all sorts. So I just don't think that it's it's worth it.
If I can just jump off of what Vivian was saying there, Ninetails, you sound a lot like a friend of mine from back in the day. I say from back in the day because he's not a friend of mine in a lot of ways because thanks to Mx Vivian making me aware of the harm that he was doing with his platform. I'm talking about Xanderhall here, right? Xanderhall had this idea. He was like a really idealistic streamer when he came to the platform, and he really wanted to reach out. He really wanted to de-radicalize. He had like a passion for that, right? He brought a few people on, and they ended up trying to dox his whole community, right? So the people that wanted to come in that door were people that wanted to do Xanderhall and his community, great harm, and even did get his address at one point. He was able to kind of move and get away from that danger, but yeah, it put everybody in so much danger, and I guess it can't be overstated, right?
I guess like the other thing, and maybe this is slightly tangential, I hope it's not, when other people show up in your community, if all they see is a bunch of people arguing, they're going to leave. And as much as everybody, as much as it's good to like try to de-radicalize people or whatever, if you like build a community where everybody's just arguing all the time, and then somebody comes in who's kind of on the fence about a lot of things you care about, they may just be put off by the fact that your whole thing is just like a knockdown, drag out debate club. Like one of the first rule in my Twitch chat is not a debate club because it's just going to turn people off when they show up. And the last thing, no matter what you're doing with your content, you don't want kind of normies or whatever to show up and just be immediately put off because of the way the people in your community are behaving and the way everybody's always arguing. And it's really, really, really easy to let that happen for fear of the people who are there arguing leaving. But it's just super important, like, to understand that, like, if a friend of mine who has no idea what any of this is shows up in my Discord and everybody's arguing, they're going to be like, what the hell is going on in your Discord? So
I don't know.
No, maybe I'm conversely attracted to that. But yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was about to say, I honestly, it's kind of the opposite for me. Where if I go in and I see everyone just agreeing with each other, why would I be there? And so I put it on mute, and I'll maybe self-promo in the channel and things like that. But I think there's a difference, though, because I get what you're saying. I understand the point, the larger point being made. There's a difference between people having discussions about a topic that maybe they disagree on, right? And people just, throwing insults left and right, getting very heated, getting very angry. I think there's a substantive difference there, right? And I think that one is good. I think the discussion is a great thing. I try to promote that in my server. But when it starts getting personal attacks, when it starts to getting into those things, I think it crosses a line, right? And when we talk about communities, I get Vivian's point as well, that there is real danger here, right? There's real danger when you let certain elements into your space that do not have the best intentions, and so you have to be wary of that. You have to keep an eye on it. Though I think that there has to be some space, and if not yours, it doesn't have to be your space, right? But there has to be something where they can interact with people who are not as toxic as them. We want to get them out of their radicalized kind of echo chambers. It's a hard question, though, on exactly how to do that, right? Like, I don't have all the answers here.
Well, one would hope that those like non-toxic people exist in their real life. And I think that it becomes a lot harder for the people who they don't have that in their real life. Maybe they don't have a good relationship with their family, or they don't have friends they've had for a long time or whatever. And at that point, I'm not sure that like a Discord server is going to, be the thing that de-radicalizes them. I think they have, I just guess maybe social problems that maybe certainly my Discord server full of drunk middle-aged Australian women isn't going to solve. But like, I think that it's, it's in, like, if people are going to be pulled out of that, I'm just thinking like their in real life community is just going to loom real large in it. And it's just a lot. It's a lot more. Oh, go ahead, Viv.
I just want to what Wix just expressed, though, is what I would call a very classic case of debate brain, right? When he says, if I go into a server and everybody's agreeing with each other, why would I want to be there? And I think that it really inhibits our ability to understand issues if we're always looking for people having conflict on issues. Because if you have people who are on both sides of a particular issue and they're just going at each other, you're generally only getting kind of a surface level understanding of the issue. If you have a bunch of people who broadly agree on a topic but have differing areas of expertise and can contribute different things to the discussion, you can then create yourself a deeper and more fuller understanding of the issue that you're trying to discuss. Because frankly, if you have people who are opposing, in a lot of cases, one person is right and the other person is wrong. Right? And that wrong information isn't information you need to know in order to fully understand the topic. Unless, of course, the topic is just why and how do people disagree on blah, blah, blah. But generally, and I think you can see this on Twitch, for example, where you have all these fucking debate panels where you're just constantly going at each other over very, very basic disagreements that have been debunked a million fucking times, and you never really get into the sort of more important and deeper aspects of the topics that you're discussing.
Okay, I'm going to swing it to Jangles and then Wick.
I'll defend the debate brain aspect of things just a little bit. I have to. I mean, look at how I look. I'm a bearded white guy. Of course, I have debate brain. So I do think that there is some utility to debate. It's of course not the only way to learn, but like in like research on education and stuff, like I think a good sign of that you really know a topic is not your ability to regurgitate information, but your ability to explain information, to put that information in different contexts, and to have your ideas questioned in reasonable ways. Like I never studied as hard as anything in my life for my like master's thesis because I had to defend it. Not just, oh yeah, I wrote the paper, all that stuff. I had 100 sources, but I needed to be able to defend everything in there. That's like a sign that you really know what you're talking about. You can defend it against some line of questioning. I do think, and when you say something like, oh, this talking point has been debunked a million times, it probably has. It's never been debunked to me though, so it might as not well have never been debunked. So it's always like everyone's a fresh person to a certain extent. It's really hard to say like, oh, this has already been. It's never convincing to tell someone your idea has already been debunked. We're ignoring it. It's
right, but I'm not talking about convincing people. Wick was talking about learning. Wick is a man of the world who has been around in these political circles for a while. I highly fucking doubt when he comes onto the majority of panels, especially if he's going on to prime panels or whatever, he's going to start hearing stuff that's way out there, that's very deep and complex and like really reaching the very bottom of whatever topic they're discussing. Stuff that he hasn't heard before, stuff that he's learning. It seems to me to be just a repeat and a rehash constantly. So yeah, sure, for random individuals new to a topic, it might be worthwhile to check out a sort of low-level Twitch debate. But if you're actually interested in learning about a topic, right, when you did your master's thesis, you weren't necessarily referencing Twitch debates. You were referencing, other studies and scholars on the subject. I don't know what you did, right? But like, I started my master's, and I certainly wouldn't have been referencing Twitch debates in my master's, even though I dropped out. But like, I wouldn't have been referencing Twitch debate. I would have been referencing the work of other scholars, right?
Oh, of course. But like most people in most topics, I know a lot about 3 things. Every other topic in the world, I have at best a Twitch politics level of understanding, and I think that's how most people experience most things. We know just a little bit about a lot of things, so it is useful to have the same surface level ideas explained a bunch of different ways to a lot of people, because that's where most people are at, and it's fine if they need to go deeper than that. But I think it's unreasonable to say that every single person needs to have a very, very deep level of understanding.
Yeah, I never said that.
I know. I'm just saying that would be really, really, really nice.
So it's also like real important. Like, what is the subject matter and what are the consequences, right? Because there's anybody out there who watches my channel, there's a few we call them the cast of characters, and most of them believe in chemtrails. And if one of them wants to come into my Discord and talk about chemtrails, that is like such a ridiculous notion that it's just fun to dunk on them and laugh at them, and like it's about the rope-a-dope and the sort of the rhetoric. That's a different proposition entirely than someone trying to sell people on some kind of ethno-nationalism or some kind of some like an ethno state. Well, that's a whole different thing, and I'm not going to have a fun little rope-a-dope with that person. Like, why would I do that?
I think the problem is with those people, right, is it goes back to the original question that ninetailscosmicfox asked when I basically said, well, what does it mean to win in this situation? For a lot of those people who are into the ethno-nationalism, etc., what it means to win is that they got to say the shit on somebody else's panel, right? They got to make the 1350 memes, they got to say a bunch of racist crap, they got a few laughs and giggles, and that is enough to, satisfy their audience, perhaps help grow their platform, and that's all they're there for. If you think that you've absolutely fucking creamed and dunked on them, good for you. I'm sure your audience is clapping, right? But they've still got that exposure. They've still helped themselves grow their platform from that engagement.
So we're gonna go Wick, and then Irene, and then Yamato. Yamato, can you actually take over for a moment while I get some extra refreshments and stuff? But Wick, please, I know you've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, that's fine. A lot's been said. I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. I think that it's different. There's a different interplay between the panelists themselves and the audience that is watching the panelists, right? And in a lot of cases, yes, if I go on a Prime panel or someone else's panel, a Stardust panel, for example, I know what I'm going to get, right? Like Stardust panel, we do the Chaos Cast. I dress up in clown makeup and stuff, and it's silly stuff, and I know nothing serious is going on. It's going to be like fun, haha. I'm not looking to have that kind of learning take place or that debate take place, more than just for funsies thing. But there is a space, I think, and while you're right, there is a space where you do a deep dive into a topic, and there isn't so much an argument, but more of a kind of like a research type of deal. When we talk about like exposing your ideas to critique, I think that's a very important part of research and learning, because if your ideas are never challenged, if your ideas are never put to the question, so to speak, that they can be very weak. And when you are asked to defend them in a space where you don't expect to have to, which happens in real life on occasion, unless you have that ability, unless you have that prior, unless you've done it before and practiced, you're going to get shit on, right? And I think that there's a lot to be said for practicing in a space like Twitch before you go to Thanksgiving dinner and your crazy uncle or your crazy aunt starts spouting off nonsense, QAnon nonsense, right? And not being able to push back effectively. And because
Can you push back effectively on QAnon nonsense, do you think,
I think you can. I think you can at least
you specifically, you.
Me specifically?
So if I started talking about Frazzle Drip, you'd be like,
no, me specifically, like I don't think I can. It's not a subject that I have debated a lot, though, right? Like I just
if it's at Thanksgiving, what you have to do is get together with the rest of your family. After the Thanksgiving dinner, you let it slide, and you get together with the other people in your family who you think can help.
Definitely don't talk about Frazzle Drip at Thanksgiving dinner. I would warn against that. Definitely do not talk about,
So Wick, were you done? Because after you, or did anyone want to respond to Wick? Because after Wick is NCC.
No, I mean, I broadly just agree with Dave. Like, challenging and getting into a debate over Christmas dinner about Frazzle Drip's not going to help anybody, I don't think.
Isn't Frazzle Drip a topping on turkey?
I think so, yeah.
I fucking hope not.
Oh, no. Oh, my God. Oh,
so,
God.
Vivian
it might be a pizza topping.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Vivian was talking about engagement, and that's something that I feel like needs to be unpacked a little bit. Part of how these right-wing extremist communities work is they create an outside enemy. It's very 1984. They create a heel, and when you come on their shows, that's you. You're giving that to them, right? And you might think that you're coming off strong because you're answering all their questions in good faith and you're backing up all your claims and everything. But if you adopt a losing posture. In other words, you're always playing defense. This is something that Innuendo Studios talks about. You can lose a debate that you feel like you absolutely destroyed on, right? Because the right-wing audience is looking for different things. Now, we've been dancing around this idea for a while, but what we're really talking about when we're talking about right-wing and debate aesthetics is dominance paradigm. That is the problem with debate. We're playing on their playing field. The dominance paradigm is, you know, something that we all have to a greater or lesser extent, and the, you know, extreme right wing, that's their bread and butter. That is what they are all about, right? So in adopting, you know, this arena of their aesthetics, we're given a choice of whether to kind of like, you know, compromise some of ourselves or to appear weak in their eyes. And I think that both of those have, you know, their pitfalls. And for that one, it's really easy to be like cringe to them, even when you're like verifiably not cringe. You're like, look at Anita Sarkeesian. She's based as fuck. But if she were to go on and fucking debate people, oh my God, she would cause such a feeding frenzy, right? And that's why she tries to not engage that stuff. When Sargon showed up to her event, she, you know, well, I mean, I guess she did. She gave him a little bit of engagement, and I think that was a problem, right? Yeah, being, you know, there on stream with them is not really what you want to do, because all you're doing is giving those right-wing audiences a reason to stay around. You'd rather have them get bored. You'd rather have them beat the same old dead horse and bitch about Anita Sarkeesian and Brie Larson and whoever. Oh wait, who are they bitching about now? Doctor Who? Is that what they're on about at the moment? But yeah, you know, you'd rather have them run out of fucking enemies, right? Rather than give them a fresh. I was about to say a fresh face, but in wrestling it'd be a heel, I'm told. Yeah.
Do you think they'll ever run out of enemies though? Like, we speak as if they don't have these wider counterculture, I'm sorry, not counterculture, these wider culture wars that they just rehash, and they're fine doing it. And in fact, it's kind of effective in some ways for them, right? Like, we could see this with the Virginia election recently and how they used the culture wars around critical race theory and being taught in schools as a way to actually win that race. And this happens all the time, at least in American politics. And right. we refuse to engage at our peril because they are winning right now.
People did engage, though. What? People engaged pretty massively on a national level, and it's still didn't really make a huge amount of difference. In fact, a lot of the pushback only served to amplify the voices of the people who were pushing the conspiracism around CRT.
Well,
so
yeah, dealing with a moral panic is very difficult. I don't know if people are know about the 80s satanic panic. Whole groups of people went to jail for satanic ritual abuse of people that there was no evidence that they even existed. Like, children didn't even exist, and these people went to jail for satanic ritual abuse. So, dealing with the moral panic is very hard. And
that was,
I've been looking into conspiracism, cults, and moral panics for a long time, and I would be the last one to ever tell you that there's an answer and a way to deal with a moral panic. You almost just got to ride it out. It's unfortunate. I wish that wasn't the answer.
I don't know if I have
that was
answer,
debated
but
on national TV as well. You remember what's his name from the Temple of Set on Geraldo Rivera's special, or the satanic I forget which one it was. The Church of Satan, the Levian people. There are a whole bunch of really fucked up people as well, but they weren't doing the things that they were accused of, and these televised debate settings only really served to amplify the panic.
So there is, there's verifiable truth in the literature about this notion that so I'm going to read directly from a study here. So people are generally more likely to share messages featuring moral emotional language. So the moral fear mongering and stuff like that. And this tendency may be amplified by people's negativity bias. That is the human proclivity to attend more to negative than to positive things. It's like if you have a bowl of soup with one drop of piss in it, you have a bowl of piss. It's a negativity bias. Kind of whatever, everybody kind of deals with that. And that's why any progressive, anybody on the left is always fighting an uphill battle, because not only are we fighting against negativity bias, but it's way more easy to be negative towards progressives because we're the different thing. The status quo is comfortable. It might not be good, but it's comfort. It's what you know. And so we're always going to be fighting the uphill battle on that. And it seems to be we need to like look at the approaches that seems to work the most. Just countering people with facts doesn't work because their opinion doesn't come from facts. It comes from that moral, emotional weight. And that's not a bad thing. Like facts mean nothing unless you have some sort of moral weight to them. So it seems to be like, again, this like very, very, very limited information on my part. I'm not an expert, but it seems to be there are ways via like the inoculation method. Like you can, instead of just countering their claims, put their frames in that moral, emotional lens and show not only why they're wrong, but what being wrong has done for their side, how that motivates people, how they are manipulating you, the person they are trying to, spur into the daily 2-minute hate. So, it is incredibly tough because people are incredibly varied and we are always fighting an uphill battle, but I don't like giving up, I don't like this. Yeah.
Okay, so Wick, do you really want to respond? Because I do want to.
No, it's fine. If you want to move on, let's go. But
I would like to move on because this.
Well, I just think one last thing. I just think if you recognize that it is a massive uphill battle to do this, and I hate using the term, but to do this de-radicalization in the way that you're trying to do it, I think you also have to recognize that the risks are very real, right? And if it is so difficult to do this in the way that you're doing it, then maybe the risks outweigh any potential reward.
Well, the risks are there whether or not I climb the hill or not.
The
hill's there.
The risks of not doing it. The risks of not doing it are worse, I feel. So, like seeding the ground totally, like that's a sure recipe for the disaster.
Nobody talked about seeding the ground totally.
I think this is a good time for me to interject and to ask a new question. Should we be deplatforming, or should social media companies be deplatforming people with extremist views, or are we just in fact like exacerbating the problem by like pushing them away in spaces where they're not vulnerable to being addressed? I'll let anyone start on this.
Okay, well, like I am dead set against simply for having an idea. Like I disagree strongly with deplatforming for ideas, even if the ideas are extreme and noxious and terrible and dangerous, right? But I'm for if you want to ban someone for using slurs, or if you want to ban someone for calls to violence, or these things, or death threats, doxing, etc. These are all okay, right? Like I'm fine with that. But one of the reasons that it can be very dangerous to ban for ideas is it sends them off into their own little echo chamber, and they radicalize each other further, and this leads directly to in real world violence. This happens in the incel community, right? Where they got their own spaces, they got kicked out of Reddit and other places, and they found their own groups, and then it led directly to violence and things like that. We can point these things out. I understand though that these ideas are dangerous, right? Like they are. There's no denying that. But when we talk about these things like censorship for misinformation, censorship for having the wrong view and the wrong idea, it gets into dangerous territory as well. We have to recognize that.
So we watched something on my podcast, The Intellectual Dollar Tree, with this guy named Jim Rutt, and his qualifications were he moderated bulletin board services in 1982 or some shit. Pretty good. And before that, he was big on ham radio, but he was saying that that these services should moderate for basically tone over substance and over content. And I actually found that to be kind of a ridiculous argument, even though he was taken seriously. Like when people get kicked off of these services, it's not because of what they believe, it's because of what they're doing most of the time. They're harassing other users. They're using their following to brigade other users. So that's a behavior, not a belief. And so I think that we need to draw like a big distinction between like what somebody's doing and what their belief system is. I think it's very important. And also like a lot of the same people who would say that your ideas should not get you banned think that you should be banned from conversations just for not being hyper civil. It's a concept called civility porn. And a lot of the IDW people will kind of shut you out of their spaces because you've, I don't know, made fun of Jordan Peterson in the past, or called Dave Rubin stupid, or suggested that it was...
excuse. It's an excuse.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is a lot of the same people who will not want you I don't want my ideas regulated, would be perfectly happy to regulate my tone. Do you know what I'm saying? And so it gets really complicated when we talk about this. And in the end, these are just websites running on somebody else's computer. And if they want to delete you from their database, it's within their rights. And the big problem I think we have in social media is the lack of real competition. I wish there was more real competition in social media.
Well, I mean, if we want to think of it,
no, go ahead.
Oh, if we want to think of it from like a cancel culture perspective, although that word, means so many things, it means nothing at this point. You get punished a lot more for violations of tone than you do for, violations of substance. It feels like this, in particular, Twitch as a community is willing to let people just go to the bottom of the barrel as far as trying to scrape engagement off of like the worst person that they can possibly find. And yes, I am talking about that person, right? In order to, in order to just like sort of enrich themselves and grab some clout from that. Whereas, if you're a little bit, standoffish, especially if, you're a woman, especially if you're trans, that will absolutely get you, get doors shut in your face. And it's not even by platforms. It's just, kind of this more of like a social thing. There's a price to be paid for violations in tone more than issues with substance.
So, okay, a couple of things. Just because I've been holding off because I realised I talked a lot and I didn't want to. But so with the social media platforms, I think we have to recognise that they're never going to have a particularly consistent position. It's not going to be a position that's like conducive to the things that I, as like a leftist and as somebody who wants to see people being less extremist as well, they're never going to have policies that are conducive to that, right? All we can do is like organise to try and get the companies to remove the people that we want removed and to organise in support of the people that we don't want removed, right? It's kind of nonsense to talk about what we think these companies should do, because whatever our answer is, they're probably not going to be fucking doing it, right? They'll do whatever's good for their bottom line. Secondly, just the whole to address the whole pushing people into echo chambers, separation thing, whatever, right? So the research that we have on this topic, and I'm sure Jangles has read some of it because I know he loves to read up on shit before he talks about it, and I know Wick has read some because I've specifically sent him studies. So the research we know we have suggests that deplatforming works to detoxify spaces, right, and to curb the messaging and recruitment of a particular group, right? We saw this with the actually, I probably don't need to go over the examples. You guys have probably read the studies with like fat shaming and the Taliban removal on Twitter and all that sort of stuff. But like, so we know that it does that. Now, Wick is also correct in that when we follow these people to whatever space they end up in, right? That is, what they call like alternative social media in some things, right? Something like Telegram or Gab or whatever, right? These platforms are much more toxic than the previous platforms that they were a part of, right? And people do tend to radicalize more once they hit those spaces. Now, to be clear, there is a bit of a drop-off, right? When you deplatform a large amount of people for a specific thing, right? Be it the ISIS propagandists or spreading lies about the election or whatever, there is some drop-off. They don't all go straight to Telegram and into like Ghost Ezra's channel and start imbibing neo-Nazi horseshit, right? But some of them do. And that's something that we do have to recognize. However, the reach to the general public of that extremist position, right, is drastically reduced because there is a clear pipeline and a clear line through from the people who were on this platform before and the people who end up on Telegram or whatever. So what we see is also just to say, oh, well, we could end up having somebody who becomes really, really radicalized and then commits real world violence, right? There are a lot of people who have committed real world violence for the things that have been said on Facebook and Twitter, right? It's not just in Gab or Telegram or whatever that people are turned into terrorists, right? There's more than enough conspiracist material on Twitter and Facebook or YouTube to suggesting that secret cabals of pedophiles are running the world or whatever, that has motivated people to bomb a phone company, right? Or block the Hoover Dam with an armored truck, right? Or try and kill Joe Biden with a car full of knives, or Justin Trudeau with a car full of guns. Interesting switch around there: knives for the US and guns for the guns for Canada. But so I don't accept that. I think that what deplatforming hopes to do, right, is to reduce the reach of extremist ideologies to what I would call front-facing platforms, the kind of platforms that your nan or your granddad or your fucking mum are likely to come across when they're just browsing the internet. Not the 4chans or the Telegrams or the Gabs, which are incredibly toxic spaces, but you have to look for them, right? Maybe not Gab nowadays, it's really highly popularized, but you get what I mean, right? These aren't front-facing platforms, these aren't the first places that people go. And the first places that people go should be ones that aren't likely to funnel them to worse places. Sorry, I know I talked a lot there, but I'll shut up for a bit now.
Oh,
sorry, my unmute hotkey wasn't working for me. So we have Carissa Avalone here. She couldn't join us right away. Are you able to say hi, Carissa, or do you need some more time? Okay, I think she needs more time.
So just real quick, just on what Viv just said, when you meet people who have been radicalized, and we'll use QAnon because everybody kind of knows what QAnon is, and everybody kind of knows like the damage that it's done to at least our discourse, if not our society more broadly. They didn't learn about it on No Gab. They learned about it on YouTube. They learned about it on Facebook. They learned about it on Twitter. Those places are the top of the funnel. And so the top of the funnel is going to catch the most people because of the way a funnel's shaped. And so the idea of trying to, you're not going to get rid of QAnon shit on Facebook. I see it all the time. The idea of trying to make it less visible on those platforms is so that the top of the funnel catches less people. Does it work? I don't know. I'm not even 100% sure that some of these companies are trying. A lot of times they just want to kick off a bunch of accounts so the Business Insider will republish their press release as if it's gospel. So
So the research does seem to suggest that platforming people does work in the sense that they do get a whole lot of much lower reach. They're not going to have new discoverability. It seems to be the case that deplatform equates to fewer, but maybe more radicalized people. So there are a few of them, but they might be more radicalized. And I say might because, well, what if they were already radicalized, and is that the reason that they went to the new platform? I do think it takes a certain level of, you're already down the rabbit hole pretty far if someone gets kicked off Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the main platforms that you go to every day, to follow them on this new platform just for them. I think that you're already kind of down the rabbit hole pretty far. So I don't think that there's any approach that is going to reach 100% of radicalized people. I think that that's just, you got to accept that there's a non-zero rate of radicalization that is absolutely going to happen no matter what our best efforts are. And how do we deal with them? It's hard to say, but I think you are getting the most people with deplatforming. But of course, that does come with a lot of drawbacks. I very much understand that as well. I do not want the unilateral decision that something I do or say or think ought to be considered now. It's wrong, and I don't want to fall victim to those same standards that I've set. It's hard to it's kind of like I want laws to exist unless they affect me badly. I wish I had more integrity than that.
No,
But
that's what we all want, man. Let's in the end, that's what we all want.
Everyone's for their own free speech entirely.
Yeah,
Everyone's
absolutely.
their own personal free speech absolutist. But when it comes to other people's speech, we're okay with some level of moderation usually, right?
Because what I think is right.
There's another point that was brought up a while ago. Is like the civility, civility politics. What do you call it? Civility porn? No, or civility theater. No. Okay.
I think you're right. Civility porn was what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. It was 100%. The biggest thing that pisses me off a lot is that people will conflate civility with respect, and those are not mutually exclusive, but those are different concepts. You can have a certain tone and say the worst things imaginable. Like you can be in a debate with someone like, I think gay people are gay because demons live in their butthole, and that's why I think they should be excised. And you can say it in a very civil manner. However, I think that's even though it's true, it still hurts my feelings. I don't want people to say it. However, with the respectability is horrible as it is, the respectability politics, it's a lot harder to garner whether someone is being respectful. That has way more subjectivity. Of course, there's a degree of subjectivity in everything, but it is a lot less noticeable. And I don't know the best answer for that because, I could be being super disrespectful right now, but I'm talking, with tone. I'm talking very calmly. However, what you're going to notice, I'm going to turn my gain down. If I started fucking yelling like this, and this is what you heard, why the fuck would you listen to me? It doesn't matter what the argument is. It doesn't matter what I'm saying. This is what you hear. This destroys conversations.
Oh, I'm there for that. Let's party.
I mean, it works for Alex Jones.
I hope I turned my gain down enough. I'm sorry.
Can I do my infrared invitation?
Hey?
You want to hear my infrared impression?
Oh, God.
Yoda 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 yo, yoda 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 yo, yoda 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 yo, yoda 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 yo yo.
But that's what I mean. It works for somebody
Two
like
holes.
Infrared. It works for somebody like Alex Jones or whatever. An animated, passionate delivery can absolutely catch people. And I think this is one of the problems that people who are in the debate scene and who are well into the respectability politics don't recognize as well, is that, it catches a very specific kind of person as well. You're way more likely to be able to encourage people towards greater acts of extremism through passionate speaking than you are through sort of just chilling and speaking reasonably. That's if you hear Nick Fuentes on YouTube, it's the different Nick Fuentes to the Nick Fuentes you hear on his own show, right? And that's because he's trying to do different things at different times, right? He's trying to, on his own show, he's trying to further radicalize, so he speaks passionately, and on more mainstream platforms, he's trying to present himself as a more mainstream and identifiable figure, so that he and the people who are more radicalized aren't excised from the more moderate communities.
So, I think you're absolutely right in this. The impassioned pleas are very a staple of charismatic leaders. When we think of charismatic leaders throughout history, we don't think of them for their ability to logic out an argument. Usually, we think of them giving soaring oration in front of cheering crowds, things like that. This is what wins people over. This is what we need to learn to do if we want to be persuasive to a larger audience. It very much we have to be able to speak the language of those that we're interacting with, right? And the way I'll talk to a leftist kind of crowd is much different than the words and the tones and the ways I'll address a more conservative crowd, right?
Is intelligence a factor? Just curious.
It's why the I don't know if intelligence is a factor. Sometimes there's a lot of real dumb.
I was meaning there, but if it were to be, that'd be funny.
Ninetails, you were baiting me. Actually, I think.
This is why
talking about intelligence.
this is why people who message me, for example, Wick, say, hey, you really inspired me to go to this protest. Hey, can you help me find a bail fund so I can get out of prison because I chained myself to a pipeline? And why the people who follow you, right, say, hey, you really inspired me to sit in a Discord all day and yammer with some rightoid. Like, the people who get shit done are the people who are passionate about what they believe.
Oh, the low-key dig. The low-key dig there. I haven't been at this as much as you, and we have different things we want to accomplish, I think, overall. But I think there's a space.
Yeah, I think you want to accomplish endless, mind-numbing debate for the sake of it, and I want to accomplish actually.
Think of it as
inspiring
distracting
people.
them while their minds are being numbed debating with me. You can go do all your activism in the real world with less pushback because I have trapped them in my endless loop of discourse.
Hey,
right?
I've seen
So
some of the people. I've seen some of the people in your community. I'm quite happy them being trapped in the endless cycle of discourse.
Look, my community
your
servers,
chat,
the honeypot
your
server.
chat's got people. Your chat's got people asking why ethno-states are bad. So, as if they're just sitting around fucking talking all day, good. I'd rather they didn't do any fucking activism.
Look, even though I strongly disagree with several members of my community is the best. I love them all. So.
I think we would all agree that.
Do you have gay drunk Australian women in your community? If you don't, your community is not the best.
True. I think we would all agree that like there are levels of like good that everyone can do. You don't have to inspire someone to go to a protest and chain themselves to a pipeline for your work for what you're doing to be something good. I think most of us like if you just make someone a little bit less like no one's going to change someone's mind, or very very rarely are any of us going to change someone's mind absolutely by ourselves, and definitely not in one interaction. But if you could like make someone rethink just a little bit how hostile they're going to be, or how like entrenched in an argument they've been using, if you can show them, hey, that argument kind of sucks, so maybe don't use that argument anymore. You've taken one tool away from them, you've made them a little bit more amenable to your side. I think that is some good. It's step by step, right? You're never going to de-radicalization, I'm sure you would agree, is not just a flip. It's not a switch. It's not something you can just turn off. It's a very long, ongoing process. And even if we can't get someone to de-radicalize, I think getting someone to be less radicalized than they were a couple of weeks ago is still a step in the right direction.
And it's holistic, right? Like people conceive, I think, of de-radicalization in the Ted Patrick deprogramming manner, where they're like, I go in, I pull someone out, I talk to them, and they change their mind, right? But that's not how anything fucking happens. The pathway out of extremism for pretty much any person is a combination of lifestyle factors, interactions with other people, access to information, and so on. So it's like it's their whole world that affects how their views progress.
Most of the people that practice that kind of like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to de-radicalize them, most of the people who have a hero complex end up kind of being feeders, right? They want to do the right thing, but maybe not always for the right reason. And I think a little bit of self-reflection, a little bit of checking your ego can do a lot, because, that does a great service to sort of deflate the way that adrenaline drives us all. And like I said, we all have that dominance paradigm in us, and we can all sort of fall victim to that. But like I said, that's the right wing's playing field, and I don't think that's where our advantage is.
Jangles?
I had something to say about the dominance paradigm because it sounds sexy, but I'll get to it.
Kind of hot, yeah. Not gonna lie.
Fuck, and now I got distracted by how sexy the radicalization paradigm is.
Oh no.
Wait. I think one of our.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I think one of our people are having trouble staying in the chat.
Technical difficulties?
Ninetails, you got to remind her to rejoin because I didn't see the DM until like now.
Oh, Wine Mom's coming later. Krista Avalon, she'll be back. She's just working on it. And then, Yamato, can you go into waiting room and work that out with her and check to make sure that she's ready before she comes on?
Sure.
Thank you.
Just real quick, if she's on her cell phone, she's going to have issues unless we give her a very specific role. So if she's on her cell phone, she has to join this room herself. I'll give her a temporary role. And then
I'll do it. I'll do it. Which role should we give her?
You have to give him the admin one, unfortunately, and then remove it once she's in here. Once she's in here, it doesn't matter. We can remove that. Thank you.
Oh, that's how
Just
you get
make
around.
sure
like,
that's who that
people
is.
can't-
Okay,
hold on, real quick.
check and make sure you're letting the right person have admin before.
Chris is cool. I can vouch for her.
Make sure it's not actually Doobie.
Real quick, if that's the way to get around someone not being able to unmute themselves in my voice room, is like I have to give them admin if they are on a mobile device. Is that because I don't?
So
I-
what? Like
can't
if
just
you have a
platform them, you have to
private room, they
super
have to
platform
join it, right? So
Gotcha.
anyone has to be joined. So the way I have this set up, so not everyone is just joining if they see people in here. Is I have to an admin or above has to drag them in. But for cell phones, that doesn't work for whatever.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I remember what I was going to say.
Go for it.
De-radicalization. So, I think there's two problems to a quote-unquote de-radicalization approach in a way a lot of people have been like describing it. The two problems. One, if you bill yourself as a de-radicalizer, you've already inoculated them against listening to you. All right, if you okay, I'm here to change your opinion. All right, ain't gonna fucking work then. Now that I know that's what you're trying to do.
Okay.
What's up?
Oh, hey, Caleb.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Excellent.
Good to have you. Right now, we're talking about de-radicalization in general right now. We keep on getting broken up because we're having technical difficulties, but would you like to give us your thoughts on de-radicalization and platforming people who would otherwise be like a radicalizing force in the Twitch/online politics scene?
I'll just introduce myself, and then I don't know, maybe
and shut yourself out too, please.
And what? Oh, shut myself out.
Yeah.
And then I guess I don't know. I might listen to what you guys are saying before I give a statement. So my name's Caleb. I go online. I go by Faraday Speaks. I was in the New York Times like 3 years ago because for the very compelling story of I watched too many YouTube videos. So anyway, I started a project on Discord where I try to de-radicalize people in the far right. I would say that project was a failure, but I learned a lot from it, so I don't really regret running it. We basically would like invite, I would get all this attention from people in the far right, so that, a lot of I consider them kids, most of these people, but a lot of the kids would join in the server, and it was mostly people fighting. I guess like if I was going to make a statement on it in general, I would just say that one reason that project failed is because there was this antagonistic dynamic to it, where you had lefties that were coming in that just wanted to own the right-wingers, and the right-wingers came in and they just wanted to own the lefties, and it just turns into a big giant shit show and a big waste of time for the most part. Again, like all the lessons learned would not have been obvious to you.
So that's lovely, right? I love this idea, peace and harmony. You get everybody together, and people just realize that people are okay. That's why I advocate that we forcibly make Richard Spencer go to a gay bar every Friday. Right?
I go to gay bars.
Listen,
Excuse me.
I think
No.
I think Richard's current girlfriend is making him do that.
But okay. So but this isn't what we're talking about, right? Sure. If you're a person of a marginalized identity and you want to talk to the people who are bigoted against you, that's off your own back. And I fully recommend that people make sure they know what they're getting into. I think often the problem is that people will go and try and speak to these people without knowing anything about them. And they'll be like, oh, it's just Nazis. I know Nazis. And, unless you've spent a decent amount of time looking into Nazis, trust me, you don't fucking know Nazis. But the other problem I have with this particular argument, though, is that quite often, if we're talking about platforming, if we're talking about what happens on Twitch, if we're talking about what happens on YouTube, Facebook, etc., right, we're talking about other people making that decision for those marginalized people. That we should put the cat among the pigeons without the pigeon's consent, basically, right? Put the fox in the hen house without the hen's consent. And I think that is extraordinarily dangerous, and I think it's often no offense, but like cishet white bearded dudes like Wick here who are suggesting that we should be doing that, who aren't the people who are at the most danger from this, who aren't the people who are going to be having to deal with the constant fucking abuse and so on. But identity politics aside, I think if you want to engage in this de-radicalization through contact theory, that should be purely with the consent of the individuals involved, and not like I just want to allow Nazis to roam free on social media, because you don't have the consent of those marginalized people that are going to be attacked at that point.
Well,
I really
I'm
don't
not
think that-
100% sure if the argument is to let them roam free. I think there's a difference between not trying to ban ideas and enforcing a TOS, because obviously you're going to have TOSs. If someone is like harassing a trans person, they need to get banned, they need to get deplatformed. I guess my question would be engaging in ideas, even if they are harmful. We already know that the martyr is attractive, right? So not only I would add on, not only would we have to be concerned about that person or the martyr himself, quote unquote, not being able to be rehabilitated, but him also drawing a large group of people who think that the reason he was kicked off for his ideas was because they had some truth in them.
Wick, can I ask you a question? Really, I'm really curious about something Wick was bringing up. What do you think? You were talking about, like, the contact. What is it? The contact hypothesis or the parasocial contact hypothesis?
Contact theory.
Yeah. Basically, the more you're exposed. What do you think then about, like, marginalized people who are themselves, kind of bigoted against their own or other groups? I mean, what causes that? If it's all about this kind of
growing up on 4chan.
I mean, like, there's no one answer to that. What causes that? I mean, like, a lot of different things, right? It's the community you're raised in. It's the ideas that you find yourself attracted to. I mean, there are people like Thomas Sowell and one of his contemporaries were raised in the same neighborhood, but Thomas Sowell obviously ended up being Thomas Sowell, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but the other one was a very far left individual. They were raised in the same neighborhood, raised around the same people. They were both minorities, but they ended up having really radically different views. So I don't think there's any one answer to this, right? But again, the data shows on the average, and obviously there are outliers here, but on average, the more you're around marginalized groups, the more likely you are to be more tolerant.
Yeah, I'll just add in with some anecdotes, right? So the first anecdote is supporting of Wick here. So on my server, there was never anyone that got de-radicalized, which, first of all, I don't like the term. Second of all, you can't de-radicalize somebody. You can't, like, all you can do is do what, like, Vosh and Destiny and them do, which is they take one person that's in cult A and they move them over to cult B. That's all that's happened. The person, nothing's really changed. We're all happy because now they say they're not racist, and that is great. But that person hasn't really changed. They're not, like, more introspective. They just went from cult A to cult B. So, like, if we're talking about, like, really bringing an awareness to that person, right? That person's going to do that on their own, and it's probably going to happen from life experience. So the semi-success that we had on the server was one individual who was an out-and-out fascist. Now, this person is still an out-and-out fascist, so it's not like this is a happy ending at the end of the story. But what I did see was we created an environment where there was a TOS, so you couldn't use slurs, you couldn't, like, there were certain words you just couldn't say. That has an effect, I think. When you sort of, like, neutralize some of the discourse, you're not neutralizing any, like, what people are talking about, but you're neutralizing how people are, how they're saying things, and then, like, specific insults. Between that and them spending time around and building relationships with, like, queer people and socialists and all these people, they did confess to a few of us on several occasions that on one occasion they confessed that they were surprised that they were friends with these types of people now. They never thought that they would do that. And on the other occasion, they confessed that they think that their ideas, they might have chosen the wrong ideology. That was through contact theory. The other side of it, though, is what Nocommentchick and Viv referenced, is a lot of the people that I've met that are radicalized were gay, were trans, were people of color. In fact, when we're talking, if we want to go back to 2016 and talk about the alt-right specifically, most of the propagandists, the leadership, were either Jewish or Hispanic. So, and that was a white nationalist movement. And I've talked to, black people that were in an explicitly white nationalist space. So I think that when we're talking about radicalization today, and we're talking about that kind of stuff, I think the race and the identity stuff is a red herring. I think it's other things that are drawing people to these ideologies, and I don't think it's specifically their identity.
If I may, I think it's just a form of like otherism. Like, well, at least I'm not as good as this. I'm as bad as this guy, right? Like, I feel like a little bit of that like plays into it, right? Just, oh well, Trump's like talking about Mexicans. I'm black. I'm not as bad as those Mexicans. They're murderers and rapists and bullshit, right? Like, I think a little bit of otherism kind of plays a part into what you're talking about. And I also feel like when I brought up Daryl Davis earlier, he was a big proponent of going into these spaces that don't necessarily like you and trying to bring people out. So
I have a good answer on
Jangles wants to say something.
I don't know if you heard my response to that stuff, Yamato, but
I heard your response. It's noted.
Successful. Okay.
What's up, Jangles?
So I actually think I have a decent answer. So when you talk about people like, to use, for lack of a better term, one of the good ones, that group of one of the good ones, your Candace Owenses, your Yiannopoulos, does he still count? He's straight.
Yeah, probably.
Your Blair White, stuff like that. I think a good explanation to give a little bit of insight is something called system justification theory. So system justification theory is working backwards from the system that you're familiar with to justify its, post hoc. So it works for a couple reasons. One, because we're familiar with the status quo. Obviously, it's it almost lacks salience throughout our entire lives. It's just what we're used to. There's a familiarity to it, and it's also every goal, every goal that you have in your life is done under the framework of this is how you got to get it. This is how you have to achieve it. These are the rules for society. So you want to operate within those rules because they're what you're familiar with, and that's how you've been shown success. So a lot of people, even if they're of a marginalized identity, will work backwards and say, well, I personally haven't experienced discrimination, and therefore no one has. They'll work backwards because it makes them feel a lot better. If you think about it, wouldn't you much rather ignore all the bad things going on in the world based on your identity and just pretend everything is nice? Yeah, you artificially feel way better about yourself, but hey, artificial and natural don't really have a big distinction here. So they'll work backwards. The homeostasis for the individual has been achieved. So I hope that made a little bit of sense as to why some people will be quote unquote one of the good ones. And there's a point like 1,000 years ago about radicalization and radicalization servers. I think we've moved way past that though. I think the only point I wanted to make on de-radicalization servers is that seems like step 5 to me.
Yeah.
No one is going to hey, I am radicalized right now, so I'm going to seek out a place to be de-radicalized. I don't think that's that's step 5. It seems to me.
I think there's a place to have online spaces for that, but the problem you're like Jangle says, I like that you're that's step 5. You're too many layers up. It's not going to be the first point of contact.
Okay, so I want to let Wit speak, and Viv, did you want to go next?
Sure.
And Dave, are you also waiting to speak?
Oh, I'm not clamoring to talk. No, it's fine. I just wanted to and it might just be an age thing here, but I just want to draw a big distinction here too between real life and the internet. In real life, if you enter a friend group, it's going to be sort of geographically limited. And so you're going to actually have to deal with people you don't like. Just the way it is, friends of friends, you go to parties, dinner parties, you're going to run into people you don't like. And I feel on the internet, it's real easy to just expel all that and not have to deal with those people. And there's also, the consequences of being real shitty to people at a dinner party that's a much higher consequence level than just being shitty to people on the internet. You don't get invited to any more dinner parties or, or ragers or whatever your kind of party is. So it's
do you know what they do in Singapore, Dave, for their multicultural program?
No.
They take all the different ethnic groups and they stick them in apartment complexes together. They have quotas. If I'm correct, they have. If I'm remembering correctly, they have demographic quotas on their apartment buildings.
See, I think and I don't know that the government should be forcing me to live in a specific zip code, but I think things like that are going to actually be more effective than trying to do it on Discord. like, I know that that's an authoritarian government thing, and I don't agree with like the methodology by which they're doing it. But I think we're all going to learn to get along a little bit better in a real world environment, at a bar, at a party, because the alternative to that is either having, like, at a bar, the bartender just kicks you out if you're starting trouble with everybody. Bartender don't want none of that mess. They want to make money. They want to make tips. Or at a party, you might end up getting in a fight, and, like, you know, we generally don't want to be in fights, I don't think. And so it's just like a lot different on the internet, and the stakes are a lot lower for being a giant asshole.
Saturday night's all right for fighting. But when it comes down to these things, like, you're exactly right. I think there's a conversation to be had about how social media specifically has led to the extreme polarization for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, the consequences of it, and how we can excise those who disagree with us or we find uncomfortable. Leads to polarization just naturally, right? There's an incentive structure in play, but that's almost beside the point here. What I really wanted to talk about is the ideas of excuse me. Oh, I had it, but you distracted me, Dave, with your social media stuff. So let me see if I can get it back real quick. Yes, systems justification theory is a thing, but unfortunately, this is something everyone does to an extent, right? Like, even the people we would consider, you know, on the left or right thinking or what have you. Like, we all, to some extent, there's a book by Jonathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind, and he talks about this a lot. And he talks about how we have a conclusion and then we justify it to ourselves. And we like to think that because we're rational human beings, quote unquote, that we arrived at our positions from rational reason, logic, and things. But for a majority of our opinions and for a majority of people, that's not how it works.
We flip the order. It's not, you know, I structure my arguments. I have all these premises that lead to a conclusion, and that's rational. It's, I'm rational, therefore my opinion must be supported by data and logic.
Exactly. So it's a good book if you guys want to read it. I don't know how you feel about Jonathan Haidt, but it's one of his better works. I recommend you do so. When we talk about reaching people, contact theory, de-radicalization, I think at the end of the day, logic, reason, arguments have a place. Talking about step 5, I think de-radicalization on the internet has a place, but we have to remember it's part of a process. And I think a lot of us are looking at through these like microscopic lenses of, well, Twitch debates don't work, or this one particular thing doesn't work, or this other particular thing doesn't work. But we have to realize it's part of a larger kind of ecosystem that needs to develop, and we don't have it perfect yet. But once we can develop this ecosystem, while we won't see any major changes in any one specific single part, we can, over time, and I'm talking years here, see a great systemic change. That's my hope, at least. That's what I want to work towards.
Well, there's not working, and then there's doing harm. And I think on Twitch we've seen some evidence of both, right? And that's the thing that I'm, you know, kind of afraid of, is that not just will it not take us in the right direction, but in some cases it takes us in the wrong direction if platforming is done wrong. And I feel like it's really easy to do it wrong. I think I've done it wrongly. I've brought on some people that I really shouldn't have, right? They're you know, where mods have been yelling at them from the chat, and you know, I backed up my mods, but I didn't kick the person off the panel for being racist, and I really should have, right? There's all kinds of perverse incentives in place that kind of make you want to push that, and I know that I've done harm, you know, to some degree with my small platform when I wasn't using it right, and I think it's really hard to use right, especially when what you're dealing with is debates and panels, and especially if part of your formula is to bring together, you know, somebody on the extreme right or somebody that's got like a viewpoint that's really odious to people. And the reason that is because the viewpoint is dangerous to marginalized people. Like, it kind of drives it into another thing. I don't necessarily, I don't think that, you know, it has to be that way. I think there are plenty of panel shows that, you know, don't contribute to that harm. But I think that if you go into it blind, you know, you're almost guaranteed to do something that you will regret at some point.
I have a question for everyone. Why do you think when we talk about like all this stuff, we're focusing on extremists? Like that's the people that we're trying to reach. What about like the people who think that just gay and trans people are they're a little bit weird? I don't know if I really like gay or trans people, or like we fixed civil rights, all right, racism has been solved, all these black people are just complaining about nothing. But I like those people, like what we would consider like an average American in like a red state. Like why
So-
isn't more of our like focus towards them rather than the people who are really entrenched?
Because we're all grifters and we want to talk about what's
Yeah,
best.
yeah, I was going to say some version of that. Yeah.
I'm being a little rude, but that's kind of part of it, Jangles. I mean, Jangles, you're right. If you want to more focus on inoculation, which honestly, if you actually want to have impact, I mean, you're probably better off focusing on inoculation and trying to reach the people that Jangles is talking about. And yeah, I mean, those people are susceptible to getting wrapped up in all this too, especially as things get worse. As especially as conditions in this country rapidly deteriorate. Those people are going to be searching out answers. And there is this kind of funny thing where once people start going searching for answers, a lot of times they seem to be drifting right. Like, Vivian, I wanted to ask you, why do you think when these platforms are just free and open Wild West, why do they all drift right? Even the right wingers, even honest right wingers will admit that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really complicated question to answer, but I would say that Jangles answered some of it earlier in saying that people are generally attracted to things that will pay more attention to negative things. And the right pushes out a lot of negativity. I think also reasoned arguments and logic and science and facts and stuff, not interesting to the vast majority of people. They tend to engage on an emotional level. Facts are feelings over facts, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that there really is a good. I don't have a good explanation for it off the top of my head. But what I would say is interesting about that is that it does seem to demonstrate that when we do uncritically and completely allow anybody to use the platform, regardless of what they're saying, that this doesn't have the mediating effect that some people on this panel are suggesting that it might do through contact theory or through reasoned debate or being allowed to mingle. No, it does seem to just be the case that it drifts things in a particular direction. I think one other thing that I would just say on this topic before I stop waffling, and it ties into something that I wanted to mention earlier, because Carissa said about, of course you have to have a TOS or whatever on a platform, right? But if it's just expressing ideas and it's not people going out and directly harassing or saying slurs or whatever, then that should be okay. To Carissa, I would say that the continued expression of certain ideas can very much create an incredibly hostile environment for certain people. We can see that in the British media with trans people, for example, right? And that would speak somewhat to your point as well, Caleb, in that when you do uncritically allow hate of any kind onto a platform, that is inherently going to push out the people who are affected by that hate, right? They're not going to want to take part in that platform because it's just an extremely stressful and awful thing to have to deal with constant fucking hate against you because of who you are, right? So the vast majority of people are not going to want to deal with that, and that probably explains some of the way those platforms are able to be taken over by hate.
Yeah, I just respond to that real quickly. So I agree with you. I think if we go back to the example, the hopeful example that I gave, that person that had those shifts, they didn't just have them in a vacuum, and they didn't just have them because they were online getting exposed to other people, but they had them because now Vivian knows it wasn't like the most moderated space. You could talk about whatever you wanted, and people did get nasty with each other.
Well, I was moderating, so
right.
It was moderated.
But in terms of but there was moderation. And this is what I'm saying, and someone else brought up the example of the bar, right? People go to the bar, and the bartender, Dave said the bartender will throw you out. You have a lot of different people in those bars. The bartender will throw you out if everybody's acting up. that's a mediator that's going on there. So even if you have all these people in there that would have these disparate views or whatever, there's a mediator that's creating a tone of civility. A TOS can't do that. A TOS cannot do that. And they're not going to hire mediators to sit on every Twitter thread and mediate the thread. That's why, like, I laugh when people are like, you know, oh, we have a propaganda issue on these. We have a right-wing content issue on these platforms. I'm like, no, you don't, because the leftists and the liberals I know on these platforms are just as hateful and just as fucking nasty. And they act just as bad. They just don't say slurs. So, you know, there's not going to be any TOS that mediates people's behavior. And if you're coming on and someone calls you a fucking idiot and a moron, then you're not going to want to talk to those people, and it's just going to increase the polarization. Like, I'd rather send them to the bar where the bartender will kick them out if they're acting up.
Well, and a bartender an experienced bartender is a Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So I think first to the point on the TOS versus the ideas, I think I agree that ideas 100% can be harmful. I think it just comes down to a cost-benefit analysis of I don't believe ideas will just go away by us ignoring them. I think there's a difference between saying slurs and not actually engaging in the ideas behind things and actually giving arguments. I think the slurs and like the harassment, that's very easy to dismiss, and I don't think there's much risk there. But my concern is for the ideas. If we are banning ideas, I think it's hard. They will just transfer to another more insular community that allows them, and the community could potentially just grow. And I agree that there can be toxic behavior, regardless of whether or not you're a radical or a centrist, etc. But I think that also speaks to what it's like more of a chicken and the egg situation. There's a demand for that. So does the supply exist to fulfill the demand, or does the demand exist because there's a supply? And that's a difficult question to answer. I think what's important is that we do start emphasizing that we need to have better discourse. I think that's 100% fair. And I think we also need to emphasize that, no, you don't have to engage with a certain idea if you don't want to, but there should be people in each community that are able to engage with very responsibly the primary ideas of other communities. And so that their community can actually see how to reasonably and responsibly interact with people of different mindsets.
Okay. So I
think Dave wanted to speak, then we're going to go Viv and Wick.
Just real quick, I had a quick question actually. This contact theory, was the study conducted on people having experiences with each other in meat space?
Real life. It was real life.
Okay, so yeah. I'm just wondering, just like how when we talk about cults and the way a cult works and how it doesn't translate specifically and accurately to the internet, I'm also wondering if maybe contact theory doesn't translate.
So contact theory.
It works online. I can tell you it works online, but again, you can't just say, oh, well, contact theory works. There's a whole parameter and there's parameters that have to be set up. Like, it does work online, but there has to be parameters set up.
Gotcha.
So there was this was partially mentioned in the one of the studies on ISIS being kicked off Twitter. I can't remember which one it was.
That's what I was going to bring up, actually. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Islamic terrorist groups, and whether or not the free speech absolutists were there to stand up for those groups. And if they weren't, well, why would that be?
Well, so when they were kicked off Twitter, part of one of the studies that I read on that, and I couldn't tell you which one off the top of my head now, did make the point that those Muslim extremists that remained on Twitter after, Zarqawi and all of that lot were fucking, well, not Zarqawi because he was fucking dead at the beginning of the war, but you know what I mean, the people of Zarqawi's school of thought who were out propagandizing, the people who remained, they became somewhat more tempered in their views because they were surrounded by people who disagreed with their extremist viewpoint. At the very least, they didn't express as extremist views as they did prior, when those big spokespeople were on the platform constantly goading them on. So I think there is something to be said about like a kind of contact theory that like goes on online as well. But I think it'd require more study, just as contact theory itself needs more study because it is shaky sometimes.
Everything needs more study.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, like, I understand ideas are dangerous, right? I think everyone can understand that having people on espousing dangerous ideas can have negative effects. It does push people away. It tends to it has the risk of spreading, etc., etc., etc.
And incites terrorism and hate crimes.
Yeah. The issue, however, is like I'm fine, right? To bring this down from the macro to the kind of the micro here to the personal things. Like I'm fine if someone doesn't want to deal with an idea or doesn't want to entertain an idea or anything like that, with them just not engaging. Where I find it frustrating is when people try to tell me what I can or cannot engage with online when we have an idea. Like
you can engage with whatever the fuck you want, Wick. The question is not about whether you can go into a space and have a conversation. It's whether or not you can have that conversation in public in front of an audience that involves the entire community that you're a part of. Okay?
Yeah,
so don't give me that fucking shit.
But that's important, right? Because when we're talking about, like, for example, my community, it is my community, is my Discord,
it's not.
My Twitch stream.
No,
right?
It's not.
I have all the power
These
here.
communities are not isolated.
I can let on who I want.
These communities are not isolated. Your Twitch channel is not an isolated Twitch channel.
But I do not want anyone else, aside from me, to be able to tell me what to do.
I'm on your channel. I'm on your channel now. I'm on your channel now.
Right now, but we need to let each other finish.
Being subjected to abuse from members of your chat, right? Like the arena, the environment that you cultivate and create is one that spreads to other corners of Twitch, right? The behaviors that you set as acceptable by what's the fucking word? Precedent, right? The behaviors that you set as acceptable by precedent then make them more acceptable in the wider Twitch community. Your community, your Discord or whatever, you may think of it as yours, but it is part of a larger interconnected web of communities, and your behavior in your space, right? You're not a huge creator, no offense, obviously.
It's
but
okay,
like,
I understand.
So your impact is like relatively minimal, but you still have it because you're a part of a network. You're not an isolated space.
That is true. However, it comes down to I do not want anyone else to be able to tell me. And I think it's very important to have that freedom for creators to be able to engage how they want and set whatever the precedent they want. Because I don't want, like, who do you want being able to tell you who to have on your, like, do you want?
I think I think there's a difference between can and should here.
Sure.
And I think maybe if people are telling you what to do, well, if they're coming to you and telling you what to do, they're telling you what they think you should do. They're not
in every case. Not in every case. In certain cases, not mine.
Well, I mean, they may be phrasing it as saying that you can't do this, but they clearly you can. So it doesn't matter that they're phrasing it that way.
We need to let Wick finish now. So, yeah, Dave, if you want to respond afterwards, I'll go back to you.
Sure. I'm not specifically talking about me personally anymore. I'm talking about when we see a creator, we do not like what the creator is saying or who the creator is having on, and then we degrade them or mass report them and seek to force the hand of whatever platform we happen to be on to get them shut down. That's where I have a problem, right? I do not like that kind of behavior.
Well, if you have Nick Fuentes on your show, man, I will happily report the shit out of your channel. That's the point, right? Is that because you're a part of this like community, because you're a part of this network, right? That you are beholden somewhat to what the moral norms are within that community. right? You can't operate as an isolated individual, I'm afraid.
But the
Wick
problem
gets to respond, but then
It's
Dave.
just giving some political realism. I mean, at the end of the day, whoever has power and hegemony, right, and that person's
that's
going to
the
dictate
problem.
their worldview.
That's
It's
the
always
problem,
it's
right?
always been that way. I mean, if we went
Yeah,
back to
but
the
that's
old
not
days,
a good thing. Like
I-
censorship, these things
yeah.
are tools of oppression, not protection.
realize.
Oh,
right?
fuck off.
They've been used by the state traditionally to oppress dissenting views, whatever they are. Because I think
And they've been used by the people.
And they're usually dangerous to the status quo. They're usually dangerous to the state. And that's why they use these tools to oppress.
It's a tool. It can be used by a lot of people. When it's used by the state in bad ways against good people, then it's terrible. When it's used by the people in good ways against bad people, then it works. Like the complete lack of purchase that the British Union of Fascists got in the north of England because of the strong anti-fascist resistance, shutting down their speeches, playing fucking huge ass, using big speakers to blast out music. There is so it's a tool. I think saying this is just a bad tool and we should never use this tool, I can't. What is it people say? There's no bad tactics, only bad targets, or whatever. I think broadly that seems to hold up, right? That, like, depending on the target, depending on what you hope to achieve, there are a lot of different tools at your disposal.
Aren't we kind of dealing with two
Hey, can we
different
go
things
to-
here?
Irene, I will cue you up. Dave, can you respond? Because I know you were trying to get.
I mean, there was a lot happened since I tried to say what I was
Sorry,
saying.
sorry.
It's really important.
Oh man, you can tell they're getting fired up.
I hate cutting off Viv, to be honest.
All right, so check it out. There's a big difference between if I don't have the power to stop you from saying what you're saying and tell you to stop saying that, than if I do. And I'm just another guy on Twitch. And if I come to you and I tell you, oh, I want you to stop saying that, or you need to stop doing this, well, I'm giving you my opinion. And I don't have the power to enforce that opinion upon you. So in the end, all I'm doing is the same thing that you're doing. I'm just speaking my mind. And so I run into this a lot when I talk about a certain sphere of intellectuals who might live in a dark web of sorts, where they will conflate harsh criticism and even like rudeness with an attempt to silence them using power, and those just aren't the same thing.
Yeah,
So-
I think that's what Wick was getting at, is that people like try to enforce their will over without hearing what the other side is trying to say, right? That's more what you were trying to get at, Wick, right?
Well, hey,
Yes.
Yeah. So just a reminder, we do have to get to no comment check, so just try to keep it brief, Wick. That's all.
Okay. Yes and no. I think that when it comes down to it, it is that when we look at Docs Talk, for example, and these other large creators here right now, we're having a conversation. I understand we're all various levels of small, some less small than others, but none of us are brigading the others. None of us are asking, like, trying to use force to silence the others. We're just disagreeing, and that's fine. That's great, actually. I enjoy that. I think it's interesting. But what I have a problem with is things like large creators with millions of followers. Like, you could look at Docs Talk as an example, where they will mass brigade, mass report someone that they don't like for spurious reasons on occasion, sometimes for very good reasons. But this tactic, I find odious. I do not like it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a tool.
Hey, no, Irene, please.
it's okay. It's okay. Now that I've had some time to think about it, I've realized we're talking about at least 3 different things when we're talking about censorship, and we're using the same words. So that might be one way to be able to untangle this unwieldy argument, because I think there's a difference between government censorship, right? And what you're, Wick, I hate to tell you, because I mean, I'm supposed to be the leftist here, but your problems with capitalism, right? Like, you know, when you're talking about like censorship by the company itself, that has got to be a bottom line decision that is getting that it's getting made by. The only reason that the company's deciding it one way versus the other is because they realize, like, long term, maybe we can make more money if, you know, like if we make this decision versus the other one. So, and then we've got we talked about the you know, the idea of, like, let's say I come to somebody and I say, I don't like how you're platforming, right? Am I, sort of maybe pushing on them a little bit? Am I violating? Am I making it harder for them to do things? If we do something a little bit more like what Vivian was talking about when we're petitioning the company to get somebody off, that's another thing. And then, of course, there's the hate rating that, who was it? Was it Wick? Were you talking about somebody that did like kind of a brigading? Or who was talking about the brigading?
There's several examples of this, but yeah, this is something I was talking about.
Yeah, but there's like 4 different things that we're talking, and we're all calling them censorship, and they're totally distinct. So, I mean, I don't know how we can really have this conversation without like kind of trying to, untwist this tangled web first, right?
I think that they all fall under the same umbrella. Well, yes, there are distinct methods of censorship and distinct individuals doing, or groups, I should say.
Well, could we name that umbrella then?
It's free speech when it comes down to it. I think it falls.
How about formal censorship versus informal censorship? Formal censorship would be a top-down perspective, like it's.
I just don't like using the same word since they're, there's a big difference between. Go ahead.
Informal censorship would be like, okay, here are the norms, the vibes of the area, and you'll get social pushback if you violate those norms.
Read the room, yeah.
Fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with informal, right? Like pushing back. Like if someone says something's really stupid, they should be called stupid, right? I don't have a problem with that. It's the top down, when people seek to use top down force, whether it be in the company sense by brigading or things like that, or whether it be in the government sense by trying to pass laws to ban books from classrooms or to ban subjects from being taught. All these things lead to less freedom of speech, and I'm not a freedom of speech absolutist, but I'm pretty close.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I just don't see how you personally, anybody can like really divide them up. I mean, I always hear this like, oh, it's not the state that's censoring you, it's a corporation. Oh, it's not the corporation censoring you, it's the mob. You realize that these are all like connected. The
connection is power. What's your point?
Well, yeah, but there's no like you can't really like separate it. Like, what's the difference between the state coming in and censoring something and then like, I mean, like
the difference is the power. The difference is the differential of power. That's the main difference I see. Yeah.
And the democratic aspect as well. We're talking about organizations that occupy a higher place on the hierarchy. There's obviously less democratic influence there.
Probably also has something to do with what power structures have like the authority to legitimize violence against you.
I don't know. I just feel like if you're. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just was gonna say. I feel like the issue that I see with like the mass reporting is that. Like a lot of people just like get taken down without just because it's been flagged so much without like actually having a valid reason, and then it gets considered again, and then they're like, oh wait, this was a mass flag. So it's like, I don't know, it doesn't seem honest. Like obviously if they did go against TOS, they should be taken down, and I think that's good for them to be taken down. And I understand that like even like a large group of people pushing back against someone or a bad take or anything like that, obviously that is democratic and that needs to happen. I just have an issue with like the idea of regardless of how you engage with someone, as long as it's someone that is considered like problematic, there's no responsible way to do it. That seems a little too far to me.
I've seen some of the debates that you guys have on Modern Day Debates, and some of the topics that you discuss absolutely breach YouTube's terms of service. Are you saying that Modern Day Debates should be taken down? Well, like when you're having conversations around ethno states with Richard Spencer.
This can be like talked about abstractly, right? Like from my understanding, I have not, of course, watched all of Modern Day Debates stuff. I haven't been modded there for a very long time, but I know they do try as hard as they can, from my understanding, to go along with TOS. And if they haven't, then they should get a strike, right?
Why is TOS sorry, I guess what I'm trying to get at is because we know that TOS on these platforms is enforced arbitrarily, right? Pretty much every single platform has a proviso against hate speech or hate propaganda or whatever, right? That it's not okay to advocate against the rights of minority, for example, right? And yet on Twitch, on Twitter, on YouTube, on modern day debates even, you can have and have had conversations and debates around establishing an ethno-state and whether or not black people are inferior and so on, right? These are things that I would say are in clear breach of most platforms' terms of service, right? That basically never get actioned upon as long as nobody says the...
Well, I think they do recognize the difference between just espousing those ideas and actually having pushback. And I think just from having some experience with YouTube, I think that's a big factor to them. Just having those ideas on the platform isn't enough to breach TOS. I agree.
Okay.
Hold on. I agree, though, that it is important that TOS is more clear, and that when you are in breach of it, they are more specific and more transparent. I think that's really important. But I don't believe that that like just having those ideas somewhere on your platform makes you in breach of TOS as it is now.
So my point though was, if you know that TOS is enforced somewhat arbitrarily, right, then why are you using TOS as this line for when it's okay and when it's not okay? And also, why should the terms of service of YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, why should they be the line at which, it's okay to try and get somebody kicked off the platform, right? You're essentially saying, I hold to the laws set up by these social media companies, and that's where my morality lies. If you're in breach of that, then you should be deplatformed, and if you're not in breach of that, then you shouldn't be deplatformed.
It's certainly an arbitrary line, one with a lot of problems, but what's the alternative?
So, okay, good. Carissa, if you want to answer that quickly. Faraday, I see you want to get on that. Does anyone else want to get on that real quick?
I just want to say something real quick.
Sorry, Jangles.
Is it against TOS to drink on stream?
That's
the real TOS.
No. As long as you don't get absolutely ass-based.
Okay, I don't have anything to respond with. Go ahead.
Faraday, the first time you met me, you showed up in my channel, and I had like 5.
Come on, Dave. We know you be getting away with shit on stream. We know you be sneaking shit on stream. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to get Ninetails here kicked off.
No, it's not against TOS on Twitch to drink unless you're doing it in like a harmful way. Like I think like a drinking contest would probably be against TOS, but you sitting there having a glass of wine is not.
I would have been banned off this place. Like,
if you get absolutely arse-faced and you're like throwing up all over the place, that could be breach of TOS.
So yeah, self-harm.
Drink moderately.
Anyway, Carissa, I think you wanted to respond to Vivian.
Yeah, so I think kind of going back to what Vivian said earlier about the democratic kind of way of going about things, that is very important. And I think while it might not seem that there's much of that going on with TOS, I believe there is. The reason for that is because I think there's this middle ground between people will leave if they feel too harassed, et cetera, et cetera. They will just leave the platform. And there's a middle ground between that and still keeping enough ideas to keep the interest of the community. So even though it might not seem like it, I think TOS is, and at least how it's enforced, is in a way a democratic type of enforcement. And I think it could be improved and it could be made better. But I find an issue with like there being these spurious false flags or just flagging of content when in reality they're just going to reinstate the person and then they're going to get another victim point. So I think that's really vital. And I think a lot of the reason I do think it's important, and for the most part I do agree with the TOS situations that we see, whether it be YouTube or Twitter or other platforms, a lot of them really crack down on like the slurs and the harassment that to me seems like the way of engaging in without, you know, having any element of good faith at all. And I think that's kind of what they should be doing, where you can have a responsible interaction with bad ideas. And that's, I think it is doing its job, even though it could be doing better.
Well, I mean,
So, I'm sorry to cut it short. We are running towards the end, and there's one more question that I want everybody to answer individually. So, if you want to add any responses you have to Carissa or anything that's been said, you can add it onto this. We're kind of going to count it as closing questions, so take as long as you need, or closing remarks. But after this, assuming Wick has nowhere to be and is willing to keep the room open, I'm going to keep streaming whatever discussion goes on from here. I'm not going to control it anymore. I'm just going to make sure we don't talk over each other too much, if anything. It's subject to Wick's approval, so you're looking around like what? But
Well, I mean, this is your panel. You're the host here. Obviously you can use this room as long as you like, right?
okay,
So you don't need my permission. Well, I guess it's polite that you
appreciate
ask,
it.
but yeah, you're free to talk as long as you like. I do have to go eventually, but yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation. So.
Okay, cool.
I can stick around like a half hour over too, I think, because my show is until 7:30. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, so, well, okay, now I feel kind of bad for ending things so abruptly. So,
Go ahead.
I'll just put it out there generally.
Cross-talky anyway, so.
Yeah, I'll put it out there generally, and if by the end I feel like it's not answered, we can try this again. But what is the best path forward regarding like the platforming and de-radicalization for online communities? What do you personally think it is after hearing this discussion and stuff like that? I feel bad for Caleb and Carissa for getting on this, but if you guys want to wait to the very end to answer it, or whenever before you guys leave, that's fine too. But anyways, I guess we will start with Viv because she wanted to respond. And if people wanted to respond, just raise your hand or let me know if you don't have a camera.
You go second if you want after Viv.
oh, I forgot what I was gonna say anyway. Sorry, what was the final question?
Oh, what path forward should we take regarding like how we, you know, handle spaces to de-radicalize people, or, and how should we handle like platforming/deplatforming people in the future? Caleb, were you waiting to go? Did I miss that?
No, I'll just go whenever if Viv wants to go first.
You can
Okay,
go
sure.
first if you like. I don't mind.
So I'll say a couple of things just based off what I was hearing here and what I've been thinking about, because I just think about this all day. The first is like in terms of the TOS and the deplatforming and the brigading, you're not going to get rid of lynch mobs or hate mobs or what. Can I find a word that's not so goddamn loaded? You're not going to get rid of mobs of people that want to change behavior. You're never going to get rid of it. It's human. And honestly, if a bunch of, you know, P words or Nazis started coming out into the streets and really advocating for their views, I think at least everybody on this panel would be getting 10 of their friends showing up and wanting to do something about it. I think in terms of the mobs, all you can hope for is that these groups have leaders that they're looking up to people that are leading them and influencing their behavior in a positive way. For example, Vosh, and Vosh and Destiny, right? I find the way that these people run their platforms pretty irresponsible. They have these little armies that go around and will just attack people, and I know everybody has that to a degree, but they don't show a very good example with the way that they conduct themselves online. And I know that we all come online and act like assholes and yell at people, but I don't think they conduct themselves very appropriately considering the power that they have. So, you know, for example, I have a lot of issues. You know, I love Vivian, and I'm definitely on, you know, the anti-fascist side, but I have a lot of problems with a lot of anti-fascist groups. I think there's a lot of deputizing, self-deputizing that goes on, and there's a lot of dragging people out and kind of putting together these mishmash puzzles and going after people prematurely and ruining their lives. Now, that's not always the case, but that does happen. The only way that's going to get mitigated is by having better influencers at the top of these things, you know, steering people's behavior in that way. In terms of the TOS, I just want the TOS to be clear. I hate when people say that it's all just about money, because it's not. I mean, we are talking about systems which do have political sway, I mean, we're talking about the biggest platforms of discourse in the world right now. I just want more clear TOS. People do get banned politically. Most of the time it's on the right, but people do get banned for their politics, and that's never made clear. I think that's damaging. I think that's harmful. It's harmful for an open democracy. It just is. If you're going to put your political bias into something, just be honest about it. Just be clear about it. In terms of just the, radicalization more generally, I think there was one thing I brought up earlier. Why do people drift right on these platforms? And I think Viv hit a big point of it. It's that people like to hear stories and they like to get charged up emotionally. And what I see a lot of the times is the right comes in, and we can see this especially with conspiracy theories. Why are conspiracy theories so compelling? Well, because conspiracy theories are useful and helpful ways of organizing. They're ways that people make sense of things. And I know that we usually think of like conspiracy theories as in like these like Illuminati Bilderberg groups and all this, but you've all done conspiracy theorizing. You've done it when you were in high school and there was some drama going on and you started speculating upon things and you started crafting a narrative. The problem that I have and that I see a lot of times with people on the right is you'll see people get pushed into these conspiracy theories because the actual meat and potatoes of what they're trying to get at is not being addressed. It's just not being addressed and no one's talking about it. And then the right ends up creating this goofy conspiracy theory. It could be QAnon, it could be whatever. That gets put up at the very top as, well, this is what this idea is all about. All the nuance gets lost. The people that are against right-wingers or against conspiracy theories, they start arguing against that point while completely ignoring that there's probably, two truths and a lie in there. I would love to see for people to actually start addressing some of these things in a more accurate way. And if you have to do storytelling to do that, that's fine. But I don't think that those conspiracy theories are going to be done away with debunking. I think that you just need to tell a more compelling story, and you need to address like what specifically is trying to be addressed in that conspiracy theory. And then in terms of the contact theory, just it works online. I know it because I've experienced it and I've seen it with other people, but it only works in a heavily mediated space. And it's going to take other things and you're going to have to address the other vulnerabilities that the person has, because there's like a dozen vulnerabilities that a person has that draws them into a particular way of thinking. And it's, again, to go back to the trans people, the Hispanic people, and all those people that are in white nationalist movements, that are in far right movements, that are in hate movements. All the contact theory in the world didn't help them, So it's a bit more complicated than that. But all right, anyway, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, broadly I agree. I think going forward, it's very, very difficult for me to even bother giving prescriptions, right? Because I don't think that the vast majority of people are gonna even listen to like the prescriptions that I would give, or the prescriptions that anybody on this panel would give, frankly. So it seems like kind of a futile effort. But if you ask me what I believe we should do, I think the social media companies and shit, we have very little control over how they're run. All we have is the power to organize with each other to try and affect them in a way that we think is going to be good for people, right? And in my view, that does involve trying to get rid of some of the most egregious influences that, like Dave put it really, really well earlier, basically sort of restating my point in a much more condensed manner, is we want to try and limit the amount of people who are caught by the mouth of the funnel right into that alt-right pipeline, kind of. Yeah. We want to limit the people who are caught in those sort of front-facing spaces. We know deplatforming works in a lot of ways, and one thing that got brought up that I had a huge objection to earlier and didn't get to address is the idea that we deplatform them and then we don't do anything else, right? When what I've said multiple times during this is that I think that somebody's path towards de-radicalization or moderating or whatever the fuck you want to call it, it has to be viewed holistically. Getting people off of the front-facing platforms isn't going to address the problem of extremism entirely, right? And I've never ever suggested that it would. And I get very frustrated when we have these conversations when people seem to suggest that I think that the answer is just deplatform them and the problem goes away. Obviously, it doesn't. It's just we're talking about deplatforming in that moment. So we do have to develop strategies to deal with the reasons why people end up falling into extremism. And quite a lot of them are life circumstances. Quite a lot of them are things that we're just going to be stuck with for a very, very long time. Things like poverty, things like simply living in a crazy polarized society where you've got people at the top saying insane conspiratorial things, you know. They're not things that we're going to be able to address. So all we can really do on an individual level, in my opinion, is look to our immediate communities. Dave talked a bit earlier about how you can have a lot more effect in real life with people who have a genuine connection with you. And I do think that that's true, although you do have to be somewhat careful in the same. We treat people who are in abusive relationships in a similar manner, where if you're just like, hey, you have to leave your boyfriend, that can end up pushing them farther away from you. So it has to be done with some kind of tact and delicacy. But all we can really do is look to our immediate communities and try and work out how best to, one, protect those communities from the designs of extremists, right? By which I don't necessarily mean recruiting. Everybody's worried about recruiting. I'm worried about hate crimes. I'm worried about harassment. I'm worried about all that sort of stuff, right? So to protect the communities that we're a part of, and to try and make connections with people. And I hope we get a little bit of time afterwards, because Ninetails said we could free form for a little bit to just talk about like what Caleb's been doing with inoculation theory and what Jangles was saying earlier, because I honestly do believe that the probably one of the number one answers is to what I've been calling inoculate people for a long time, which I don't know if it's the same thing that Caleb and Jangles are talking about, but to make people aware of the ways in which high control groups operate, how they control people, and if you can do that, I think genuinely you can help to inoculate a lot of people against that kind of control and protect their ability to think critically about what it is that they believe, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We don't want to move people from cult A to cult B, like Caleb earlier said, right? We want to give them back their ability to think for themselves. Yes, yeah.
I guess who's next?
Yeah, Rick, you should just start talking. Really.
Oh, fair. I just don't want to. I don't want to button line or anything. I wasn't sure if there's this particular order.
Oh no, I. By the way, everybody, just join in whenever. I'm gonna, if anything, in the very last half hour now, like.
Well, we haven't all kind of set what we're gonna say at the end. If you have to take a break or something, though, somebody else can moderate or whatever, real quick.
Yeah, if anyone needs to go and wants to say their closing piece and shout themselves out, just let me know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
Let's just do.
I'm gonna have to take off after.
Well, you should go then if you have to go.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
why don't you...
Sure. Sorry, now I feel like I'm butting in line. Sorry, I'm a princess. I think I told you that in the beginning. Anyway, yeah, just like Viv, I'm worried about the perverse incentives of this platform, that they're going to be more powerful than anything I have to say at this moment. You asked me what path we're supposed to take forward. I would say that the best path in this situation is to turn around and take the path we're not thinking of and go backwards from here, because I think a lot of harm has been done in terms of blind platforming for engagement, right? right? I think that it's caused us to help our own worst enemies, to create a right-wing Twitch ecosystem where there was none, and to become intellectually captured by that ecosystem to the point that where you don't even realize the amount of the right's work that we are doing for them. And as someone who's a part of a marginalized community and had to see up close what it looks like for a larger creator to allow transphobic brainworms to spread on a large platform, I would plead with everybody here to give this a second thought. Check your ego at the door and check your hero complex too, because marginalized people need your help, right? And if you really want to be a hero, you know, we're in this to win, not just to score ego points, right? Think with your don't just think with your dominance paradigm, you know, think with your smart brain too. So yeah, that's my take on all this.
Okay, do you want to shout yourself out?
Right. Yes, I am nocommentchick. I stream on YouTube and on Twitch, and also make videos. Getting more and more into that every day on YouTube. I'm also, you know, really active on Twitter. I've really been enjoying Twitter lately, so you can follow me at Irene Geller. YouTube is nocommentchick, and Twitch is nocommentchick CC. So thank you so much for this chance to be here, Ninetails and everybody. I've had a lovely time talking with all of you, and I think this was a great panel.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay.
So that's the whole thing. You got to do this quick. You gotta move like a. I don't know exactly. I might have left a little prematurely there. I wasn't sure what was happening, but for a second I thought, wait, am I agreeing to? Because I don't do the after panels. There was one time on Prime Kai that I did an after panel, and I ended up on stream with a very sussy baka, named Flamenco, and I don't want that to happen again. I don't want to like show up like, oh hey Doobie and Samantha and Eris, what's going on here? And they're all like, they're bringing the bats, they're bringing the iron, the what is it, lead pipes? Yeah, they're coming in with lead pipes. They're like, we heard No Comment Chick is on an after panel. Hell yeah, like, right? So yeah, we're not trying to feed that frenzy. Anyway, yeah, that was really fun. Ninetails is great, and all those people are, you know, that was a lot of fun. I guess I don't know all those people super well, but Yamato is awesome, Ninetails is awesome, Viv is awesome. What is behind me? Oh, and why is it coffee? Well, that looks lovely.